So this is a little bit more about IBD than it is about IBS. It's based on studies that we at the University of Massachusetts have been doing over the last 15 years or so. I got my roots in cardiovascular medicine and kind of dabbled in food allergies and obesity and diabetes, and then somebody with IBD lands in my office, and the GI directive is, we've given up on this patient, see what you can do with diet. It's been a tough road, actually. Okay, so I did click this. Did it change? There we go. This is University of Massachusetts. I'm peeking out over here on the 8th floor. We do have a teaching kitchen. It's old and outdated, but we have great plans for it that is located diagonally from this. And such magic can happen when people experience food as opposed to telling them what to eat. It makes a huge difference. So objectives today, understanding dietary approaches to some of the similar symptoms of IBS, the pain, the bloating, the dyspepsia. Urgency is another one that can be incredibly debilitating to my patients. I always pay attention to that one first. Both diarrhea and constipation. Understanding some of the science, which is an ongoing effort. And so if anybody says, okay, this is the diet, stop right there, because diet is evolving. Our food supply is changing incredibly. We can't rely upon something that happened 50 years ago and say, okay, that's the diet that's going to work. We have to evolve what we're doing from a dietary perspective as the food supply evolves, as we learn more about metabolic consequences of what we eat. So there are certain things that we have identified. I can sort of give you some broad strokes of a dietary pattern that has shown to be very effective, not only with IBD, which I like to use as a model, but also other chronic disease states. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use a slide borrowing from Dr. Inga Peter, who is my co-PI. She's located at the Mount Sinai, and she did a study in 400 women, an observational study supported by the Helmsley Foundation. And what we're looking at is microbiome diversity of babies born to women with or without Crohn's disease. So using Crohn's disease as the model here. And what we see is that the babies are born compromised as compared to the healthy controls. So now what? What do we do with this? Well, this is the study guide that they have used in the meconium study, and now we are using in our current MELODY trial. And what we're looking at is the women, both women with and without IBD, Crohn's disease in particular, and then we follow them out with all kinds of measures and follow the babies out as well. Then, because you can't use humans, it would be not ethically appropriate, we use germ-free mice and inoculate the germ-free mice with the baby stool and take a look at the immune system going out in what happens with the mice. It's really a nice model. Poor mice. I know. And so we see some significant differences in the immune system of the babies and how it develops going out, depending upon the mother's disease state. So what do we do with this? And I invite you to join me into a realm of possibility, where what we're doing is intervening in the 3rd trimester of the women's pregnancy, which is thought to be, and we're learning more all the time, but thought to be crucial in development of the baby's microbiome. Babies are not born sterile. And interestingly enough, the recruitment is nationwide. I'm going to shamelessly plug for that. I have flyers and cards, and any women you know, especially women with Crohn's disease, we would like to recruit into this study. It's non-invasive, has to do with a dietary pattern that is oriented around changing the microbiome, not only of the women. We know we can do that from the research that we've done thus far. But what we're looking to do is to change the microbiome of the babies. So early life is critical. We know that, to developing an immune system. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, if we can do this for Crohn's disease, why can't we do it for type 1 diabetes? Why can't we do it for other autoimmune diseases? Why can't we do it for other disease of inflammation? And so we do see, yes, we do see that in these women, their babies are born, they're not unhealthy, but they're an epigenetic trigger away from something that may happen. The diversity of the microbiome is what we pay attention to there. It's not only the species in the microbiome, and so you may say, okay, this is way beyond acidophilus, way beyond lactobacillus, way beyond one food or even two foods. It's a dietary pattern that encourages variety and maturation of the infant gut that is transmitted, and women are very powerful, within the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. So what we're talking here, and every time I say this, and I've given this lecture a few times now, but every time I say this, it kind of stops me in my track. That treatment is one thing, and I do a lot of that in my clinical practice. I'm treating problems, and you do as well, those of you who practice clinically. Prevention of disease. That just amazes me. So quality of life is very important, and is the first thing that I pay attention to as a dietitian in outpatient practice. I'm listening to, as detailed as possible, report of symptoms that mean something to me in terms of how I'm going to customize the dietary pattern of the patient to address their concerns. So my first concern isn't weight. And like Dr. Lustig said this morning, weight is a symptom. Okay, it's uncovering a whole health of other factors. And so I ask the patient, and this is where we want the patients themselves to be their own advocates against obesity bias. I ask the patient to take their mind off the weight and to focus on health going forward. Because if we can do that, it actually turns out long term to be a better motivation. So we look at the reported symptoms. I'm pointing at the wrong screen here. Reported symptoms, medication use, because there's a lot of medications that can affect your health. They can help you gain weight. They can help you in certain ways. They can hurt you in others. They can also affect the microbiome. In my studies, we are controlling for the medications. We're not changing them. Clinical assessment, and of course levels of inflammation. And then what we're doing is we're looking at functionality of the microbiome. Again, it's like a family of organisms that come together in different ways at different gatherings to provide different types of functions. So it's at this point, if somebody's saying, oh, you need to get more of this particular organism, I'd say, you're vulnerable. Take it with a grain of salt or a grain of yogurt. It's more about how that organism functions within the ecosystem. So when it comes to C. diff, we're treating one organism that has gone awry, and we can treat that quite nicely with a fecal transplant, 96% effective. But when it comes to IBD, or maybe IBS and other types of inflammatory diseases, we're talking about an ecosystem that has gone awry. Can we do it with diet? Absolutely. I've seen it again and again. Not in everybody, and we do want to study those people as well. So, does anybody know or not know about the microbiome? Because I didn't have a definition in this slide. I'm just sort of assuming that you all know, and I'm a dietitian, not a microbiologist, that it's the good guys and the bad guys that populate us. They are within us, they are on us, they contribute to the nervous system, they communicate to the brain, they are involved with our immune system, they make vitamins, and they even impact stress and behavior. And so when it comes to diet, as opposed to maybe some other forms, do no harm is a wonderful way to approach medicine. So we're using diet as a delivery vehicle of beneficial foods instead of ones that may even poison us, carrying adverse bacteria. And we also use diet as a substrate. And so, yeah, I may divert from other dietary patterns because mine is an inclusion diet. I'm suggesting that my patients try foods that they may not have had previous experience with, and that is a huge behavioral change. I've seen in my studies that people are much more willing to remove foods from the diet than they are to add foods to the diet. And this is where the teaching kitchen can often come in. So IBD happens to be a very responsive model for dietary change. We can get a very quick response from the gut, as opposed to the microbiome of the skin, for example, or the eyes, or other things that may be affected with changes in the microbiome. I can get a response with my IBD folks and my IBS folks within days at times. The worse they are, the quicker they respond. But the diet is difficult, and we do want to customize it to each patient's lifestyle and disease. And so, but why is IBD increasing, not only in this country, but worldwide? It used to be nobody knew what IBD was. And the GI docs are all saying, apologies to Shanti, eat what you can tolerate, because there are currently no guidelines for inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease, as opposed to IBS, is a disease in which the lesions, the injury happens on the inside. And sometimes it can be life-threatening. Certainly it can be debilitating, and many patients become disabled. And aside from questioning whether gluten is the culprit, which I have often in my patients as well, is it just about gluten, or is it something else that we're dealing with? And I think that we need to widen our inquiry, and maybe it's something about the genetically modified organisms. Maybe these are having an unintended effect, and maybe not all of them, maybe some of them. Maybe if I put something into my seeds that are growing so that the bugs don't eat them, maybe our bugs are no longer happy as well. So sometimes simply avoiding wheat is a big one. And maybe it's not the gluten. Because I also see when people avoid corn, they do even better. Okay. So when you're hearing symptoms from your patients, when you have symptoms, it's important to distinguish the systemic disease. Okay, so if we're talking about diet and heart disease, you don't feel dietary effects in your heart. The heart disease happens after. But when my patients with IBD, they always say, oh, it's the hot dog that did it, right? But that happens like between 2 and 4 hours after eating. That is dyspepsia. Okay, it may also be correlated because it can co-occur, IBS, IBD. So this is to be, so IBD is both dysbiosis, thought to be the cause and the effect, or imbalances in the microbiome. But what happens downstream systemically tends to start altering digestion itself upstream. So we get to a point where patients are saying, it doesn't matter what I eat, everything hurts. Well, just eat what you can. And most patients may turn to white bread, cheese, and high-fat foods. Which, if you listened about the saturated fat lecture, it's going to have an impact on inflammation and the disease itself. And so we get a vicious cycle. So this is like my favorite picture. And this is the Mucinex guy. Because as much as I love the idea that there are good bacteria they still scare me. And so they all kind of look like this. Okay, here's the happy guys over here. There's a junction protein, and this is the villi. On the top of the villi is a mucosal lining. And so what will happen with dysbiosis, it's like a teeter-totter or seesaw, depending on what geographical area you come from. And not only the bacteria themselves make their way into circulation, but substances, more important substances that they make that contribute to inflammation, quite irritating. And depending on your genetics, you see how we're like getting multi-levels of complexity here. You may have malabsorption, nutrient deficiency, like if we see celiac disease here. You may see anemia. There's other forms too. Autoimmune diseases, inflammation, autism, other types of brain disorders. What we can do, seal up leaky gut, and we can impact these things downstream. So simple, right? Okay, so I have a zillion slides, and they're probably way too many for like the time. This is why this guy's really important right here. And this is a really fun picture because it has a lot of information on it, like what happens if you don't do what you're supposed to do. Okay, so right over here, this is why we have so many patients. Normal gut biota decreases all this rotten stuff. And yes, we've gotten to a point, and what we're doing, I have a lovely relationship with the Center for Microbiome Research at UMass, and we have a very clear role assignment. I'm in charge of what goes in on this end, and they're in charge of what comes out on the other. And they love what they do, and I love what I do, but my part is the tasty bit. What happens if we don't eat correctly? And other types of factors, such as how you're born, your genetics, et cetera, bad things can happen. So, summary slide, healing with diet. What do? Well, we want to restore the good bacteria. How do we do that? How do we do that? There's the short-term answer and the longer-term answer. I'm in it for the longer term, and I'll give you methods on how to help your symptomatic changes in the short term. And we do it with prebiotic foods. Okay, prebiotic foods are FODMAPs. Not only FODMAPs, but a lot of them. Probiotic foods. Get a variety, it's beyond yogurt. In fact, getting a variety of yogurts is often important. How many strains do you have? And yes, sometimes I'll recommend VSL3, some of the other probiotic supplements, but I always go for the diversity and potency if I can. And the marketing is about potency. So it isn't necessarily 30 billion is better than 100 billion, or I mean the other way around. It's about the diversity. We take away the food source because we don't know how to get rid of the bacteria, the bad guys, without giving you an antibiotic. And the antibiotic is going to do what? Yeah, and now I've got more work to do. Because just like if I rototill my garden and kick back in my lawn chair, are my tomato plants going to pop up? No, I'm going to get a lot of grass and weeds. And maybe some of the volunteer tomatoes from last year will reseed themselves. Okay? So we want to take away most grains, okay, and this has to do with wheat and, you know, that big question. Like most conferences, you're going to come away from this, if it's a good conference, with more questions than answers. Sugar. Okay, sugar is bad for you. Is that a surprise? Yeah. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. But that's another political discussion. Okay, so what do? How do we repair the situation? How do we fix these injured epithelial membranes? It's very important that the very thing that patients are told to avoid in IBD, aka fiber, is included. It's the form of the fiber that we need to focus on. So just like with babies, I carry people, adults are mostly who I treat. Kids respond really fast compared to adults. They heal very quickly. So we change the form of the fiber. We puree it, we put it into flour so that they still get the nutrients that that food provides, as well as the dietary fiber, which is fermented. Okay, not all gas is bad gas. In the colon, producing short-chain fatty acids that heal the injury. So we're after remission of disease, and hopefully, may not happen in my lifetime because I'm really getting old, a cure. Oh my God, a cure. Okay, and certain good bacteria do, like S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii, which is in Florastor, is a very nice, it's the one that is resistant to antibiotics, and so if you have Lyme disease, which is very prevalent in my area, it's the one that can probably help you go through the treatment of doxycycline. It's very important to anyone that you have the balance of nutrients that key into your immune system. So it's not just about prebiotics and probiotics, it's also what I originally went to school with, which is learning about all those nutrients that are essential for human health at every life stage. So we need to include these. We don't want to leave these out when it comes to helping a patient with chronic disease. So this is what we do. We also modify certain fatty acids. So it's not just about the grains, it's also about the fatty acids. And in that a high saturated fat diet is going to change the bile acids and does contribute to the growth of adverse bacteria. We also see sort of the little X factors. You live in the city, you're going to have a snoot full of microparticles, some other kinds of things that may come with the water, emulsifiers, which we add to our foods, including the alternative milks, carrageenan, polysorbate 80 in the ice cream, maltodextrin. Some of these have been shown to contribute and cause IBD in animal models. They are inflammatory. Guar gum may be okay. So there's so much we don't know yet. But beware, buyer beware, take a look at your ingredients list, and a lot of things that you're consuming actually never even make it to the ingredients list because they're generally recognized as safe. And they help that processed food with mouthfeel, with the crispiness of the Pringle, with all kinds of things. Over 500 particles that can go in there to help them sell the food. Oh, okay. So FODMAP's diet is over here on the other side, and I didn't do that diet because I didn't want to totally insult everybody in the audience. This is specific carbohydrate diet, which is the diet that was originally proposed by the GI doc with that first patient that I had 15 years ago, and lo and behold, it worked. It's essentially an exclusion diet, does have yogurt in it, but it eliminates a lot of food. The Mediterranean diet, okay, so, and it's not that my diet has all of the answers, but we want to say, okay, well, what's missing as much as what do we have in excess? Prebiotics aren't really considered in the effect of the Mediterranean diet, but I think they have a huge impact. And the Mediterranean diet is not necessarily absent of those, but we've been focusing in the Mediterranean diet on mostly the fats, right? You always think about, oh, it's the olive oil. It's making sure that it's not a low-fat diet. It's an adequate fat diet, and the fats come from monounsaturated fats, and they come from omega-3 fats. It's also important that we have certain limitations, and the limitations at this point are oriented around depriving adverse bacteria of their food supply. That's my theory. Maybe in the future there will be, and they are working on this, a capsule that you can take that contains an ecosystem that has been matched to your profile. Oh, you don't have strep throat. You're missing the such and such. Here's your capsule, right? no antibiotics. Can you imagine? There was a time we didn't have antibiotics. But is there anybody in this room who's never had antibiotics? One. So there's a, oh my God kind of reaction, right? Because where would we be? Where would we be? Okay, so I gotta kind of move along. Okay, this is my one FODMAP slide. I like the FODMAPs because it does help with quality of life, all those symptoms of bloating. But long term, okay, this is a study that sort of compared patients on a prebiotic diet, which is sort of opposite FODMAPs, with low FODMAPs. They had equal results. At the end of the study, when they discontinued the diet, the folks with the prebiotics continued to do better. So feed them, they will come. This is so true. Where do they come from? I have no idea. Seriously, I mean, I don't know. We can't detect these bacteria in your feces prior to initiating prebiotics, but we can after? I don't know where they come from. Interesting, okay. And somebody who knows that answer to that is gonna let me know, right? Digestive enzymes. Don't let me forget about talking about digestive enzymes. So 4 components, again, another summary slide. 4 parts to this diet. 3 parts add, 1 part subtract. 1 part subtract to get rid of the adverse bacteria. 3 parts add to feed them, they will come, and also to have an optimal immune system. We have done a number of studies now. The last 2 are not published yet, but I'll tell you all the results. The first study was more of a case study approach. When it comes to diet, it's difficult to study diet because people do look at what they're eating. So it's tough to have like a placebo diet. And the other thing that happens with dietary studies is motivation to adhere. So I'd rather have a study like the Melody trial, where in pregnant women, and don't argue with a pregnant woman, it's up to them whether they want to or not to change their diet. And so we're studying both patients with Crohn's disease who don't change their diet, and that's like the Meconium study, but also in the current trial. So it's up to the women saying, yes, I would like to change my diet, and then we match them with a dietitian who helps to guide them through the 3rd trimester, customizing the diet to their lifestyle. And so we can help patients to get off their medications. We can help patients to first correct either constipation or diarrhea. Most of my patients with IBD, probably 80 to 90% are going to have diarrhea or loose stools, watery stools, urgency. 10% are going to have constipation. Most of those 10% are going to have Crohn's disease located in the ileum. I don't know why, I'm just saying here's the results. Very interesting. So we need to study these people a little bit more because the ileal Crohn's may be a little bit tougher. We do have a food frequency questionnaire that we have developed in order to measure, because everybody wants to know what's the most important part and what's the least amount I have to do to get there, right? So we group foods into prebiotics, probiotics, adverse food, how much do you eat of it, beneficial foods, which means that's sort of the healthy eating index, making sure you're getting your nutrients correlated with overall mortality, and then an overall score. And so you can kind of see before and after. Here's our teaching kitchen. It's so small compared to what I've been exposed to here. But magic still happens because it's about the food. Okay, so a little bit more about the diet. If someone is in a flare, bloody diarrhea, one of the treatments that we have, in kids it's enteral nutrition, which is basically removing any irritation to the gut while providing the child with nutrients. In adults, we often tell them to go without eating, NPO, for a period of days in order to rest the gut. What we're doing here is kind of going back to the enteral nutrition idea, but what we're doing is super nourishing them. We're not going with some of the commercial beverages that have a lot of sugar in them and not enough of the components that we know to affect the microbiome. So it can be a blenderized nutrition. Doesn't mean that it's not a tasty nutrition, but people get tired of it. But they're feeling better. So we advance the diet, we advance the textures, we put in foods that have a higher digestive requirement. We may initiate some digestive enzymes. Anybody use digestive enzymes in their practice? Yeah, they're so helpful. Basically, it's a cause no harm. You get a digestive enzyme available on Amazon, $15, maybe less, local grocery stores. It's lipase, protease, and a bunch of ACEs that help to break down the foods. And I have only 15 minutes. Break down the foods. I really like that. That somebody may be reacting to. So you're probably familiar with that. If you're lactose intolerant, you may or may not get away with taking lactase prior to ingestion of the offending food. Sometimes you need a lot more than that. Digestive enzymes are very helpful because they can help you with breaking down a lot of the FODMAPs foods. And so before I throw somebody on a FODMAPs diet, I want to try the enzymes out. And I actually keep a bottle in my office and give somebody 2 or 3 of them to eat prior to lunch and dinner. Indications of which, here's like a case study. You start hearing, oh, I really get a lot of my bloating and gas, and it's after lunch, and dinner's the worst, and at nighttime. Ding, 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 digestive enzymes. Because hydrochloric acid builds up overnight, and breakfast is often not the trouble. So when you hear it happening later on in the day, you can often offer your patient, and as we age, we produce less of these enzymes, and so your elderly may need them anyway, taking 1 or 2 prior to the meal at lunch and dinner. And it gets to a point where if you can take them for a while, the gut actually starts to, it's a stimulating factor as well, and sometimes the folks won't have to take them anymore. The younger they are, the quicker they can adapt. We have a huge website of recipes and information. You're welcome to steal any of it and use it with all of your patients. We also have a maintenance diet. It's a diet for the whole family. It's not just a diet for the patient. It's got all of the nutrients that you need for kids, for anybody. We already went over this is Fozzie, who smiles when you walk in the door. I just love that. I love animals. Okay, so probiotics, good foods. Sources of probiotics, I love miso. And I really like the dandelion leek miso. Talk about FODMAPs in addition to probiotics, right, together. But this one is really, really good. The South River, made in Massachusetts, very good quality. Kefir, other types of organisms. I like this one, not necessarily because it's lactose-free. It contains lactase enzyme, but because it's got 10 different strains of bacteria that help to create that yogurt. And you know what? It tastes good. And so I suggest to all of my patients that they buy plain yogurt. And usually my patients are starting off from a high sugar, high fat diet, and these are bitter flavors that are developed over time, 3 days to a week to change your taste buds. Sodium is really quick. Some of these other things are quick. And I ask them to add raw honey. Why honey instead of sugar? Anybody a honey fan? Yeah, honey's special. Honey is very special. If you have a terrible cut, you can put raw honey on it to help heal, because the bees put a substance into the honey that is antibacterial. I mean, Egyptian tombs, the honey is not bad. Okay, This is one of my favorite easy recipes. Copy this. You can use it very easily with just some peanut butter, warm water, and whatever spice you want to put into it. And it goes on anything. I have patients eating it by the spoonful even. I might be one of them. Oh, and maybe or maybe not, there's a video that'll pop up here.
Okay, so here we go with an amazing go-to dressing. We're going to use it for salmon today, for the fish and parchment. But really, this is going to be such a versatile sauce that you can always have on hand to put over cooked vegetables. I mean, really anything. So let's get to it. So we're going to take some miso, okay? Your favorite miso. Quality is key. This one I really like, Miso Master. Remember to store it in the fridge because this is a living thing. This is really good probiotics, okay? And this is all about getting really good bacteria in the gut and restoring that balance, okay? So we're gonna take the miso and take some warm water and start with a little bit, okay? Because what we wanna do is start to kind of incorporate this miso with a whisk. And they even make special whisks for this, okay? You can see how it's kind of breaking up. And then you can start to add a little bit more. And by the way, it's up to you how thin or thick you want this to be, okay? You see how this is thickening nicely. Be patient, sometimes it just takes a minute or two for the miso to incorporate. There's a little kind of a ball getting caught in here. I'm just gonna get in there, break it up, okay? So this is our base. And by the way, this is how you just treat miso in general. Maybe you're finishing a soup and you wanna add some miso to it. This is what you would do with some of the warm broth from the soup. And then you can just finish off that soup at the very end by adding the miso. In this case, we're gonna get all this delicious stuff in here. So I'm gonna take an orange. I've washed this and I'm gonna zest the orange right in. This adds incredible aromatics. I mean, geez, I wish you could smell this right now. Whoa, just some of that. You could also use some lemon or lime zest, whatever you have on hand. And you can mix and match as you wish. We're gonna take some tahini. Delicious tahini, and this is basically just sesame paste, okay? Super delicious, really, really nourishing. I love tahini, okay? We're gonna add a bunch of fresh herbs. This has some cilantro in it. You could add whatever you like, whatever you've got. Parsley, dill, basil, okay? We're gonna get some tamari. Now, tamari is gluten-free soy sauce, okay? So there's no wheat used. Quality is really key. Seek out really good quality tamari. It makes a big difference, okay? And you can do this to taste, all right? And then some fresh lemon juice. Could be lime as well, okay? And then we're just gonna whisk this up. Oh, this is gonna be so good, okay? So you're just really whisking to incorporate all the ingredients. Now's a good chance to taste. I mean, it's really great. If it's too thick for you, if it's a little aggressive on taste, you can always thin it out, make it a little more mild and stretch it with a little water, and that'll get a little thinner, okay? And that's that, okay? This is a really awesome, nourishing, super delicious addition to so many different dishes, okay? I hope you like it.
Okay, so that was Erin Goldstein, noahstable.com. There's lots of other probiotic foods, and I think this is where I have to slide through the slides a little quickly. Kimchi, there's various cultures that use all these foods. It's artichokes, not only the globe artichokes, but also Jerusalem artichokes. All of these amazing foods can contribute to the variety, the diversity of your microbiome. These are, I'm gonna just kind of go out on a limb here, more important than the probiotics. Having a variety of prebiotics can get you where you're going. Soluble fiber is wonderful. It binds with blood fats. I first came across it as part of my recommendations in helping folks with LDL cholesterol problems. It's really a versatile fiber. It requires the intestinal bacteria to ferment it for it to do its magic. It's also crucial when it comes to managing urgency and diarrhea. Just a little slide, mechanisms. These are the good guys over here that key into shutting down TNF-alpha. If you want me to go back on a slide, I can. Okay, dietary fibers, short-chain fatty acids, good for you. Yep, we love them. NFKB, bad guy. Okay, soluble fiber fermentation, another sort of mechanism slide. Low levels linked to chronic bowel inflammation. And then here's, oh, it's so lovely, yeah. My garden is just starting to grow. These are oat groats. And so I had a little talk with the Quaker people this morning. It's like, oh, where's the groats? Oat groats. If you have not discovered them, put them into your diet. This has a huge effect on the microbiome. And I'll show you a case study on that one if we're able to get to it. Ground flaxseed, bananas contain inulin. Asparagus is a great one. We want to include all of the nutrients, but we do it in particular ways and particular textures for the patient to be able to digest and go through with a better quality of life. Avoiding trans fats still prevalent in the food supply, especially processed foods. Fat-free foods often contain the trans fatty acids. Making sure that the proteins are good. So phase 1 menu ideas, this is just a partial list. There's so many choices when it comes to IBD-AID. Phase 3, even better. Foods to avoid, well, yeah, it glows in the dark. If you get it through your car window, I was told recently, it's not food. Okay, yeah, eating real food. So foods to avoid on this diet to decrease the detrimental bacteria. Wheat, corn, maybe we can go with organic because I'm not sure about the GMO stuff. And sometimes you can eliminate the GMOs by going for the organic. I'm not quite sure about the labeling on that one or lack thereof. Sugar, lactose, the milk sugar, better off without it. And then excess, not good at all. Barley may be okay. Barley also has gluten in it. And so, interestingly, I have some IBD folks who are doing just fine with the barley in the diet. We may be adding that to our foods list soon. And we're looking at some of these others in research, the effects of food. So case study. He's 50, he's 5'8", 168, has been following the specific carbohydrate diet for the last year, which worked real well for him in the beginning. And he's frightened because with the SCD, there's a list of legal and illegal foods. And so you're sort of frightened off trying anything on the illegal list. 5 minutes. And so what we do is we add soluble fiber in the form of ground flaxseed, which also has 18 carbon omega-3 fatty acids. It makes a difference, it's not enough. At this point, people get desperate, and that's when I really want to see them, because they'll do almost anything, right? But, you know, it's still a negotiation. So the nice thing about this guy is that he sends his stool off for analysis. And he did this prior to seeing me, and he did this after to seeing me. So let's kind of take a look at that for a minute, because this is real. What was happening on the specific carbohydrate diet, and remember, this was managing his symptoms of IBD. And what happened when he introduced ground flaxseed, and what happened when he started going for the oat groats and the rest of the diet. Huge changes. One case study, now many patients later showing similar results. We can change the microbiome with diet. So what's next? I love statisticians. I wish I knew more about it, but they're sort of important when it comes to the translation of research to dietary guidelines, especially nowadays. There are a lot, and people should be suspicious. What do you mean this is good for me? Just because you say so, right? Sounds like my mother. I need evidence. That's what we need. We need to identify the microbial pathways. We need to know a lot more. We are still in our infancy when it comes to knowing what we do in the microbiome, but at least we have a snapshot. We have a ballpark. We have some idea of the players that matter.